take a look at some of the new features in Totem, and then we'll talk about CUI, and then I'll just for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions. Lots of new features, some very apparent, like in the POAM create corrective action methodology and workflow. We now have the ability to pre-populate a corrective action based on some templates that we have for you. So like, let's say you don't have FIPS validated cryptography where you need to. You can pre-populate a corrective action plan based on a template. So just by selecting this drop down here, it automatically fills in some of the boilerplate actions for you in your POAM. And you can add rows and delete rows. I'm still in the process of testing this, so I'm not going to test it live with you and tempt the punishment of the live demonstration gods. I haven't tested these buttons yet, but I have tested the pre-population. Pretty cool. And you'll notice, instead of having one big field that all of your actions, your corrective actions are lumped into, we have individual rows for each of the corrective action, and you can choose individual dates for each sub-step, and the overall corrective action plan completion date will reflect the longest date out in your individual sub-steps. So you can see this date up here changing as I change an individual sub-step date. And you can also assign individual different responsible entities for each of these corrective action plans or corrective action steps. And then you can also, a little text field here where you can capture resource estimates, time, labor, and monetary resource estimates. So a significant expansion of the features in the corrective action planning workflow in the tool. And then Matt, thanks for the IRP idea. I'll take a look in a sec. And then in the control status page, some new features as well. There's an indication in the left-hand menu of how many organizational actions have not been completed under a given control family. That's this number here. And then if any of the controls are non-compliant, so let me find one that's easy to make non-compliant. If any of the controls become non-compliant, you'll see an indication of how many non-compliant controls you have in that family as well, over here in the left-hand menu. And then some other little sort of quirky features, like you can now type implementation details directly in the field, or you can pop it out into its own pop-up modal. And there's some bugs that we fixed here, like now the scroll wheel works in the pop-up modal. So you can, a couple of different ways to edit the implementation details. And then the comments field, if you put comments in a comments field, there'll be an indication of whether or not there are comments in there. So there are no comments here, and there are comments in this field. So a couple of little improvements there. Oh, my favorite improvement of the entire Totem 4.0, I think, although I'm still figuring things out. Let me switch to the CMMC level 3. By the way, we're going to release this in early October. So we're going to get this thing pen tested, or we're going to do all of our beta testing, and then we're going to get it penetration tested in mid-September. And then we'll finish up with our final round of testing and release second week of October is the goal right now. So let's say we have added all of the additional CMMC practices as individual control line items in the tool. So let's say we're interested in looking at the .99 requirements. Now let's do .97. That's a better one. Where each family now has a specific requirement requiring us to establish and maintain and resource a plan that includes that family with its own set of organizational actions. Let's say I just wanted to filter and find all of the .997 controls. I can do that from my filter under the practice ID. Now, what's really cool is I can save this as a saved filter. So I can say 997 controls. I can save this, and I don't have to remember the most convenient way to filter on this. I can just choose from saved filters in the drop-down menu. So if you're working on a particular set of controls, maybe let's do this. Let's clear that filter. And let's just search for any that have multi-factor authentication. So we've searched for the keyword multi-factor authentication. We can save this as a MFA controls. We can save this as a saved filter. So very excited about this feature in the tool. Really excited about that. Another feature is the ability to manage your inventory of CUI in the Totem tool now instead of in the spreadsheet that we provide. You might recall that identifying the CUI in your environment and characterizing its lifecycle is the first step in our methodology towards compliance. We can now create an inventory of CUI in the tool. I haven't tested this, so I'm not going to demonstrate it, but it will work nicely. And you'll have rows here, which will be, each row will be a CUI item in your inventory. And then last but not least, we have an audit logging feature. So the owner, a person with the owner role in the tool, will be able to see all activity that's happening in the tool. So some new features there. Several other new features, like we cleaned up the risk assessment page. It just looks nicer, a little smaller but nicer. You can read all of the rows and columns here now. And then other bug fixes, typo fixes, and some other features that are less apparent injected into the tool. So very excited about this. We are going to roll it out second week of October. We'll shoot out an email letting everyone know that their instance is going to be migrated before it's migrated. And then we'll let you know when it has been migrated and you can log back in, and that will all be transparent. It'll all be in the background for you. All right, so those are new features in the Totem tool.